Why is there a conflict between Russia and Ukraine? Ukraine, which was part of the Russian Empire for centuries before becoming a Soviet republic, gained its independence when the USSR broke apart in 1991. The country tried to shed its Russian heritage and forge ever closer ties with the West. The decision by Ukraine's pro-Kremlin President Viktor Yanukovych to reject an association agreement with the European Union in favor of closer ties with Moscow led to mass protests that resulted in his removal as head of government in 2014. Russia responded by annexing Ukraine's Crimean Peninsula and supporting a separatist rebellion that broke out in eastern Ukraine. Ukraine and the West accused Russia of sending its troops and weapons to support the rebels. Moscow denied this and said the Russians who joined the separatists were volunteers. According to Kiev, more than 14,000 people have died in the fighting in the Donbass, Ukraine's eastern industrial heartland. For its part, Moscow has sharply criticized the US and its allies NATO for supplying Ukraine with weapons and holding joint exercises, saying this encourages Ukrainian hawks to retake rebel-held territory by force. In addition, Russian President Vladimir Putin has repeatedly said that Ukraine's aspirations to join NATO are a red line and expressed concern about plans by some NATO members to set up military training centers in Ukraine. This, Putin said, would give them a military foothold in the region even without Ukraine joining NATO. What does Russia want? Russia does not want Ukraine to join NATO, and expressed this in its list of security demands sent to the US last December. Among the demands was a halt to all NATO exercises near the Russian border. Many of these ultimatums were dismissed as nullities by the West. In addition, NATO calls for withdrawal from Eastern Europe. In December, Putin said Russia wanted guarantees that rule out further NATO steps to the east and the deployment of weapons systems that threaten us in the immediate vicinity of Russian territory. Putin offered the West the possibility of holding substantive talks on the issue, adding that Moscow needed not only verbal assurances but legal guarantees. Ukraine's admission to the alliance would require the unanimous consent of the 30 states that make up the alliance. The US and NATO have now responded to the demands. While neither Moscow nor the Western powers have made details of these responses public, it has become clear that Russia's main demands, a fundamental exclusion of Ukraine from membership in NATO and a commitment that the alliance will not expand further east, have been rejected. Will Ukraine join NATO? Ukraine is not a member of NATO, but it would like to become one. It is considered a partner of the alliance. Before membership can be considered, says NATO, Kiev must eradicate scourges such as corruption. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg in December rejected Russian demands to reverse a 2008 pledge to Ukraine that it would one day become a member. Stoltenberg maintains that Russia cannot veto Ukraine's accession when it comes time to consider the issue. However, analysts say NATO allies, led by the United States, are reluctant to expand their military presence in the region and further jeopardize their relations with Moscow. While U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has expressed support for Ukraine's membership in NATO, President Joe Biden has been more ambiguous on the issue. Will there be an all-out war? The West accuses Russia, which has stationed 100,000 troops on the Ukrainian border, of preparing an invasion of its pro-Western neighbor. Biden claims there is complete unanimity on how to deal with Russia. The Pentagon has put 8,500 U.S. troops on standby for a mission in Eastern Europe, and NATO said it is sending ships and jets to the region to bolster its defenses. President Putin's spokesman, Dmitry Peskov, said these measures only exacerbate an already tense atmosphere. Russia denies it has plans to invade Ukraine and accuses the West of exacerbating the situation. It is uncertain whether war will break out between the two countries, but some analysts believe Russia could invade Ukraine to score a quick, decisive victory and boost its bargaining power in future talks on expansion and spheres of NATO influence. What happens if Russia invades Ukraine? Western countries have pledged their support to Ukraine, but some reactions have been harsher than others. The US and the UK have supplied weapons, while Germany plans to send a medical facility next month but will not provide military equipment. There has also been much talk of sanctions to punish Moscow. The US and its European allies have publicly promised to hit Russia financially like never before if Putin moves his military into Ukraine. Leaders have given few details because they believe it is best to keep Putin in the dark, but Washington and London have spoken of taking personal action against the Russian president. Excluding Russia from the financial system SWIFT, which moves money from bank to bank around the globe, would be one of the toughest financial steps they could take and would hurt Russia's economy immediately and in the long term. The move could cut Russia off from most international financial transactions, including international profits from oil and gas production, which account for more than 40% of the country's revenues. The US also has one of the most powerful financial weapons against Putin if he invades Ukraine, blocking Russia's access to the US dollar. The dollar still dominates financial transactions around the world, with trillions of dollars in play every day. Finally, the US is considering imposing export controls to potentially cut Russia off from the high tech that makes warplanes and passenger jets fly and smartphones operate, among other things.